I was 31 years old when I realized the engagement ring on my finger had been bought with my own credit. At the time, I thought it was the most romantic thing that had ever happened to me. The proposal happened on a late summer evening, in the cracked parking lot of the strip mall I had been going to since I was a kid. The kind of place with a beauty supply on one end, a laundromat on the other, and a grocery store in the middle that always smelled like fried chicken and pine sol. The sky was the soft bruised purple, the air still warm enough that my t-shirt clung lightly to my back. I had just finished a long shift at the pharmacy inside the grocery store, my feet aching in my cheap black sneakers, my hair tied back with a scarf that had seen better days. When I pushed through the sliding doors, the fluorescent light fell away behind me and the evening wrapped around me like a sigh of relief. The parking lot was mostly empty, a few cars scattered between faded white lines, old gum darkening the asphalt in spots. And there he was, leaning against his car under the flickering street lamp. Malik. Tall, dark-skinned, the kind of handsome that made aunties nudge you in church and say that God had done his good work that day. His locks were retwisted fresh, falling just to his shoulders, and his tattooed forearms were crossed over his chest. Even from the doorway, I could smell his cologne, that warm woody scent that made my stomach flutter no matter how long we had been together. He pushed off the car when he saw me, grinning, one of those wide, boyish smiles that always made him look 5 years younger. He said that he could not let his future wife walk to the bus after a long day like that. I laughed and told him he talked like we were already married. He said that maybe we should fix that. If I am being honest, I did not see it coming. I thought he was just being cute, the way he always was. For 3 years, we had been together through every kind of storm, his father's stroke, my mother's job loss, 2 evictions, 3 broken-down cars. We had sat on milk crates in empty apartments and planned a life that felt bigger than anything we had ever seen growing up. He knew I wanted stability more than anything. A steady home. A family that did not change its shape every year. So when he dropped down on one knee right there in the grocery store parking lot, under that flickering light with the grocery cart corral behind him, my heart almost stopped. He pulled out a small velvet box and popped it open. I remember the ring catching the last slant of sunlight, the stone sparkling harder than anything I had ever owned. My breath caught in my throat. My hands flew to my face. People coming out of the store slowed down, watching, smiling, phones in their hands. He told me I was his piece. He told me he did not ever want to imagine a life where he was not coming home to me. He told me he knew we did not have much yet but that he wanted to build everything with me, from scratch, brick by brick. I did not hear every word because my heart was pounding so loud in my ears. I nodded. I cried. I laughed. I said yes. The strangers outside the store clapped. A woman pushing a cart with 2 toddlers in it wiped her eyes and yelled that black love was beautiful. A teenager recorded us, holding the phone up like she was filming a music video. He slid the ring onto my finger, his hand steady. The metal felt cool against my warm skin. It fit perfectly, as if my hand had been made for it. Later, in our small 1-bedroom apartment, after the congratulations calls and the bad selfies and the cheap champagne his cousin had dropped off, I held my hand up under the kitchen light and admired the way the ring caught every gleam. It was not huge, but it was bold, a clear stone set in a simple band, the kind of ring that said I see you, I choose you, even if the bank account does not. I asked him how he had afforded it, my voice half teasing, half afraid of the number he was about to say. He laughed and told me not to worry, that a man was allowed to have a few secrets, that he had handled it. He said he had some savings I did not know about. He said I deserved something real. I wanted to believe that so badly that I let it land and stay. I slipped the ring off only when I washed my hands or put on lotion, turning it between my fingers like a charm. At work behind the pharmacy counter, customers noticed. Older women asked how long we had been together. Teenage girls asked to see it up close, their eyes wide, imagining their own future rings. I said that Malik and I had earned it the hard way. And in some ways, we had. We met in the waiting room of County General 3.5 years earlier. I was there with my mother, who had fainted at work from stress, hydration, and life being too much. He was pacing circles around a vending machine, hands in his hair, his father somewhere behind double doors after a stroke. Our eyes kept meeting. Our lives kept colliding. My mother's room ended up across from his father's. We shared bad coffee and worse vending machine sandwiches. We swapped stories of childhoods lived in cramped apartments, of working 2 jobs, of trying to hold strong for people who did not know how to rest. He told me that his mother had died when he was in high school and that his father had done the best he could and fallen short in 1,000 ways. I told him that my father had floated in and out like a bad dream until he disappeared for good when I was 11. We understood each other's disappointments. When we finally had our first date, it was in the break room of that same hospital, with takeout from the cafeteria, our legs bumping against each other under the table. He said I made fluorescent lighting look good. I told him he was corny. I fell in love with him in little everyday scenes, the way he always offered his seat on the bus to older folks, the way he combed my mother's hair gently when she was too weak to do it herself, the way he listened when I ranted about customers who thought my time was free because I worked behind a counter. We moved in together a year later, renting a small apartment in a brick building that always smelled like curry on one floor and weed on another. The walls were thin, the plumbing loud, but the rent was almost reasonable and there was a laundromat across the street. He worked as a supervisor at the shipping warehouse off the highway, organizing pallets and schedules, coming home smelling like dust and cardboard. I worked my way from cashier to tech at the pharmacy, counting pills and counseling people on side effects I had memorized from the pamphlets. We both dreamed about more, me about going back to school for nursing, him about opening a small delivery business of his own. We talked about buying a little house one day, something with a porch and a yard and enough closet space so I did not have to store my winter coats at my mother's. We were building something, I thought. So when the engagement came, it felt like a natural next brick. We told everyone. My mother cried and hugged him so hard he laughed and said that he needed his ribs for the wedding. His father, still recovering but stubborn as ever, slapped him on the back and told him not to mess it up like he had messed up his own marriage. We picked a date on the calendar, circling next June in red ink. We talked guest lists and food and the possibility of using my auntie's backyard instead of renting a hall. We started looking at bigger apartments. Something with a second bedroom, maybe, for our future baby or my mama if she needed to stay with us for a while. That was when the money conversation started to shift. First, it was small things. A bill I thought he had paid that was suddenly overdue. A parking ticket that had ballooned into a fine. A notification from my credit card about a balance higher than I remembered. Every time, he had an explanation. He said he had just forgotten to tell me about the payment he had put on my card, that it was temporary, that he would pay it back when his overtime hit. He said the parking ticket was because his cousin had borrowed his car and parked it wrong. He said not to worry. He had me. I wanted to believe it. I also wanted the house, the wedding, the life. So when he came home one evening with a manila folder full of glossy brochures about first-time homebuyer programs, my eyes lit up. He said the warehouse had been shaky lately, rumors of cuts. He said he wanted to get us into something stable before anything changed. He said if we had a house, even if everything else went left, at least we would have a roof we controlled. I sat at the kitchen table flipping through the pages, pictures of smiling black couples holding keys, kids running through open front doors. I could almost smell the new paint, feel the doorknob under my hand. He said the bank was offering good rates and special programs, but our best bet was to put the mortgage under my name, at least at first. He said my credit was cleaner, that my student loans were smaller, that he had some old medical bills and a charged-off card he was still working to clear. He said it like he was confessing something, shame hiding under the words. I had grown up watching my mother's life shrink every time my father made a bad decision and disappeared. I had seen how being tied to someone else's mess could drag you down even when you did everything right. I told myself this was different. We were a team. So when he asked me to co-sign a small personal loan to help consolidate some of his debts and bump his score so we could qualify for a better rate, I hesitated only a little. He showed me the numbers, the interest rates, the plan. He had gone to the bank, he said, talked to a loan officer, got everything together. All he needed was my signature. He slid the papers across our tiny kitchen table, the fluorescent light buzzing lightly above us. I read the pages slowly, at least the parts my overwhelmed brain could process. Credit score this, term that, APR, penalty. It was dense, full of language designed to please the bank more than me. But I saw my name printed neatly, and his name under it, and I saw the line for the amount. Not huge, but not nothing. Enough to fix his credit. Enough, he promised, to put us on track for the house and the future. He held my hand and said we were building together. I signed. Weeks later, he put that ring on my finger. At the time, I thought it was a symbol of his sacrifice. I did not know yet that the ring itself was proof of mine. I did not know yet that the bank papers I signed to help clean his credit were also used to purchase that stone. Or that the betrayal wrapped around that ring was only the first layer of something much bigger. Something that would eventually lead me back to my mother's old living room, my credit in ruins, my fiancé a stranger, and a woman I had never met sitting on my auntie's couch holding a baby that had his eyes. By the time my auntie called me that Sunday afternoon, the ring on my finger had started to feel heavier than it looked. It was not the metal or the stone. It was the weight of everything that had shifted in the months since he slipped it on my hand in that parking lot. The loan payments were set to autodraft from my account. At first, it was fine. Tight, but fine. Between my pharmacy tech paycheck and his warehouse checks, we could cover rent, groceries, the note on his car, my student loans, and this new loan. But then the warehouse cut his hours. Then they cut his position. He came home one day with a cardboard box and a severance envelope and a look in his eyes I had never seen before. He said they had tried to keep him but the numbers were bad. He said the supervisor had pulled him aside and told him it was not about his work, it was about the bottom line. He said he would find something else. He did, eventually. Odd jobs, short contracts, a stint driving for a delivery app. But nothing with benefits and nothing steady enough to fill the crater his warehouse job had left. Our conversation started to circle around the same points. Bills. Jobs. Money. Every time I brought up the loan, he said he was working on it. Every time I suggested calling the bank to figure out adjustments before we fell behind, he brushed it off, saying that would just make them look harder at us. I checked my credit score one night on my phone while he snored beside me, the room lit only by the screen's glow. The number had dropped. Not dramatically yet, but enough to make my stomach twist. I told my mother I was a little worried about our finances. She said that marriage was about weathering storms. She said not to give up on a good man just because a job went away. She told me stories about how she and my father had gone through worse. Of course, in her case, the man had gone through and out. I decided I would be different. I decided I would be strong. I picked up extra shifts. I let the overtime eat my weekends. I came home with swollen feet and a smile I could take off only when I closed the apartment door. That Sunday, I had just finished a dose pack for a customer who swore she knew me from church when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen between customers. It was my Auntie Brenda. The time on the display made my heart skip. It was after 5. In my family, calls after 5 on a Sunday meant good news or bad trouble. Weddings, funerals, arrests, or gossip. I texted her that I was at work and asked if she was okay. She sent back a short message. She said I needed to come to her house after my shift. She said it was about Malik. The rest of my shift felt like walking through water. I filled prescriptions, printed labels, answered questions, but my mind kept jumping back to her text. About Malik. It could have been anything. Maybe she had seen him at the bar with his friends acting a fool. Maybe he had said something slick to one of my cousins. Maybe my auntie had heard from one of her many sources that he was talking big about the house we had not yet bought. I told myself 100 small scenarios. None of them matched the one I walked into. My auntie lived in the same narrow brick row house she had been in since before I was born. The front stoop had 3 concrete steps that sloped slightly, the rail wobbly but still holding on. The house always smelled like something simmering, beans, neck bones, something seasoned with memories. I climbed the steps, my heart thudding hard enough to make my fingertips tingle. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street, kids still riding bikes in the road, someone's music pulsing low from a parked car. I opened the front door. With our family, you knocked and walked in, and stepped into the familiar living room. And there she was. A woman I had never seen before, sitting right on my auntie's floral couch like she belonged there. She was mid-20s, maybe a little younger than me. Light brown skin, dark hair pulled into a puff at the back of her head, edges laid neatly despite the humidity. She wore jeans and a t-shirt, hands folded tightly in her lap. Next to her, in a faded car seat on the floor, a baby slept. The baby had Malik's eyes. Big, wide-set, framed with thick lashes. His nose too, soft and rounded in miniature. For a second, the room tilted. The sounds of the street outside went muffled, like someone had turned the volume down. My auntie stood in the doorway to the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her face wore that look I had seen when she delivered hard news, braced, sad, firm. She said my name softly and told me to sit down. I did not sit. I stared at the woman and then at the baby and then back at my auntie. I asked who they were. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. The woman swallowed. Her eyes were shiny but steady. She said her name, low. She said she had been seeing Malik for about 4 years. The timeline punched me in the chest. I had been with him for 3.5. I laughed then. Not because it was funny. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when your body does not know whether to scream or collapse. My auntie took a step closer, her hand out like she might steady me. The woman kept talking. She said that Malik was the father of her baby. She said that he had been there when she went into labor, cutting the cord, taking pictures, crying harder than she did. She said that he was not there now. Her mouth twisted on that last part. Hurt and anger and humiliation moved across her face, one after the other. She said that she had found my auntie's address in his glove compartment, on an old envelope. She said she had recognized my last name from some paperwork and from the way he never quite answered certain questions. She said she had gone through his phone 2 weeks earlier and found photos of me. Engagement photos. The ring on my finger. His arm around me, his face pressed against my hair. She said that when she confronted him, he had tried to twist it. He had said I was his cousin, his friend, someone he was helping out. The lies had been flimsy and fast. She said she did not believe him. She said she was not perfect either, but she was not stupid. So she had shown up at my auntie's house, baby on her hip, ring on my finger in the photos, demanding to know who I was. And my auntie, God bless her nosy, stubborn, too honest soul, had sat her down on that couch and listened. Then she had called me. The baby stirred in the car seat, his tiny fingers flexing. His skin was the color of fresh coffee with too much cream, his hair a soft dark fuzz. I realized I was gripping my purse strap so hard my fingers hurt. I finally sat, but only because my knees suddenly felt weak. The couch cushion sighed under me. I looked at my auntie. I asked her if she had known. She shook her head slowly, her earrings swaying. She said she had always liked Malik, but she had never fully trusted the way his eyes moved in a room. She said she had kept her mouth shut because I looked happy, because she did not want to be the one to plant seeds of doubt where there might not be any reason. She said that was her mistake. The woman on the couch, her name was Shanice, looked at me with this raw apology in her eyes. She said she had not come to hurt me. She said she had come because she refused to be the secret anymore. She said she had a son now and she would not raise him thinking he was someone's shame. The ring on my finger burned. All the puzzle pieces that had been hovering around me for months started sliding into place. The late nights. The mysterious Cash App transfers. The sudden need for my signature on that loan. He had not just been cleaning up his old mess. He had been financing his new one. A diaper here. A car seat there. Some rent, some clothes, a few gifts to keep Shanice feeling chosen while he told me I was his piece. Using my credit, my name, my future as the foundation. I felt a wave of nausea rise up. I put my hand over my mouth and breathed slowly through my nose until it passed. My auntie put a glass of water in front of me. Her hand lingered on my shoulder for a second, warm and grounding. The betrayal sat between us like another person in the room. There was no twist. Not really. The truth was exactly what it looked like. He had been living two lives. The thing that made it cruel was not the surprise, but the careful way he had made me help pay for it. I asked Shanice how long she had known about me. She said 2 weeks. She said she had spent those 2 weeks angry enough to burn everything down and scared enough to do nothing. She said her own mother had told her to let it go, to focus on the baby, to accept that men did what men did. She said she could not. Looking at her, I saw a younger version of myself, tired and hopeful, holding on to a man who had given her just enough to keep her investing. I did not see a rival. I saw another victim of the same pretty lies. The baby yawned, his tiny arms stretching, his little fists opening. My throat tightened. I thought about the house brochures. The loan. The ring. I thought about my mother, sitting in our old living room years ago with a stack of unpaid bills and no man in sight. I thought about my grandmother before her, sharing stories and fragments about how she had stayed with my grandfather through half his nonsense until he died and left her with more debts than memories. I thought, suddenly, about how often the women in my family had paid, emotionally, financially, physically, for the choices the men made. Malik had used my credit to buy my ring. He had used my future to fund his secret child. I felt something in me harden and sharpen, like a blade being honed. I told Shanice I believed her. I told her I was not mad at her. I told her I was more grateful than anything that she had walked into my auntie's house instead of staying home waiting for him to halfway show up. Her eyes filled with tears. She said she had been prepared for me to scream. I told her I might scream later, but not at her. She laughed weakly at that, a small, broken sound. My auntie said that I needed to go home and talk to him. I agreed. But I already knew something in our story was over. When I walked into our apartment that evening, the air felt too still. The living room looked exactly the same, the thrift store couch with the little tear in the arm, the low coffee table with the water ring on it, the TV remote shoved between the cushions. The diffused light from the street lamps painted soft rectangles on the walls. But the energy had shifted. Or maybe I had. Malik was sitting at the table with papers spread out in front of him. The sight might have reassured me on another day. Evidence of him working on our future. Today, all I saw were possible lies stacked in neat piles. He looked up when he heard the door. His face brightened for a half-second, then his smile faltered when he really saw my expression. He said that I was home late. I told him I had stopped by my auntie's. The way his jaw tightened at that name was small, but I caught it. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door. The clink sounded too loud. I walked to the kitchen sink, turned on the water, and rinsed out a cup just so my hands had something to do. The running water covered the thump of my heart. He said that he had been looking at some new loan options, that he thought maybe we could refinance before the interest hit too hard. I turned the water off. The silence afterward pressed against my ears. I dried my hands on a dish towel and turned to face him. I told him I had met Shanice. His whole body went still. His fingers, which had been tapping a pen rhythmically on the table, froze mid-tap. The sound died. He said her name like it was something sour in his mouth. He asked what she had told me. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. I said she had told me more than he ever had. I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I did not dissolve into tears. Something in me was past all that. I told him I knew about the baby. I told him I had seen Malik Jr.'s face. The name was a guess, but the way his eyes flinched told me I was right. I told him I knew my credit had been used to keep him afloat in both lives. He stared at me like he wanted to deny it. Then his shoulders slumped. He said that it was complicated. It is always complicated when the truth comes out. He said he had been scared. He said he had not meant for it to go so far. He said he had only been with Shanice in a serious way before he and I got back together that one time, but then she had gotten pregnant, and he had panicked. He said he had tried to do the right thing. I stared at him. I asked him which part was the right thing in his mind. The part where he proposed to me in a grocery store parking lot while his child was still wearing newborn diapers? Or the part where he used my credit to buy my ring and fund his secret? He flinched again. He said he loved me. He said he had always pictured his life with me. He said Shanice had been a mistake that turned into a child, and he had not known how to handle that without losing everything. He said everything as if my heartbreak and her exhaustion and that baby's needs were all just variables in an equation in his head. I told him that babies were not mistakes. Choices were. He had made many. He tried to come to me then, reaching across the room. His hands opened and closed like he did not know what to do with them anymore. He said we could fix it. We could co-parent. We could figure the finances out together. He said we had come too far to throw it away over one bad situation. One. I thought about how many lies it took to maintain one bad situation. I thought about the late-night deliveries, the secret phone calls, the loan papers. I thought about my auntie's couch and Shanice's eyes. I thought about the baby's face, the way his little mouth pouted in his sleep. I told Malik that this was not one thing. It was 100 little things he had chosen every day. He had chosen to lie to me. He had chosen to let Shanice feel crazy when her instincts told her the truth. He had chosen to let his son show up in the world as a secret financed by my name. He had chosen to point me toward a future built on a foundation he had already cracked. I told him I was not going to marry him. He stared at me, mouth open. For a moment, I saw the boy from the hospital waiting room, scared and hopeful, not the man who had orchestrated this double life. He said that he would fix it. He would get his own place, his own loan, let me off the hook. He would go to the bank. He would talk to Shanice. He would do anything I asked. I shook my head. I said that some things could not be fixed with a new payment plan. I took the ring from my finger. The metal was warm from my skin. I set it on the table, right on top of the stack of glossy brochures about starter homes. It looked smaller off my hand. He stared at it, his eyes glassy. He said he had never seen me like this. I told him he had never given me a reason to be like this before. I grabbed a small duffel from the closet. I had packed it earlier, at my auntie's, while she watched silently, pressing her lips together to keep from saying "I told you so," even though she had never actually said those words. A few clothes. My work shoes. My toothbrush. Not everything. Just enough. I walked past him to the door. He called my name. I paused with my hand on the knob. I did not turn around. I told him I hoped he would do right by his son. I told him I hoped he would learn how to tell the truth before that boy grew old enough to recognize lies in his face. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The air of the building smelled like someone's cooking and someone's downstairs argument. I felt strangely light and heavy at the same time. On the bus to my mother's, I stared at my bare hand. The faint tan line where the ring had been stood out against my brown skin. I thought about all the times I had twisted it absent-mindedly, thinking about seating charts and color schemes and which aunties would start drama if we did not seat them right. Now there would be no seating chart. No rented tent in someone's backyard. No walking down an aisle for a man who could look me in the eyes and lie so easily. My mother opened the door before I even finished knocking. She looked at my face, then at the duffel bag, then at my bare ring finger. Her shoulders sagged. She did not ask what he had done. She simply moved aside and told me to come in. The next few days blurred. Calls. Texts. Voicemails I did not listen to. My auntie checking on me. Shanice sending a simple message saying she was praying for me and that she was sorry, even though she was not the one who owed me that apology. I went to work. I came home. I sat in my childhood bedroom, feeling simultaneously like a teenager again and like someone who had aged 10 years in a week. I checked my credit score. It had drop-kicked itself even lower. Late payments on the loan. A maxed-out card I had not used. Malik had stopped paying the loan months before. The bank did not care whose name it really served. It was under mine. The betrayal wrapped itself around my future in numbers and red marks on a report. One evening, my mother sat on the edge of my bed and ran her hand over my hair like she used to when I was little. She said that love made fools of all of us at some point. She said the trick was not never being fooled, but not staying a fool once you saw the trick. I stared at the faded poster of a singer I had loved at 15. I said I had helped fund my own heartbreak. She nodded, quietly. She said now it was time to fund my own recovery. 2 years later, I stood on the cracked sidewalk in front of a narrow blue house with peeling paint and a crooked porch, holding a set of keys that were finally, fully mine. The air smelled like fresh cut grass and somebody's barbecue down the block. Kids yelled in the distance, their voices bouncing off the row of brick houses. A dog barked, then another answered. The house was not much to look at from the outside. Just 2 small windows facing the street, a front door that needed a new coat of paint, a patch of yard that was more dirt than grass. It was perfect to me. When the loan officer had slid the papers across her sleek desk and I had seen only my name under the word borrower, my hands had shaken a little. The credit rebuilding had been slow, humiliating. Payment plans. Phone calls. Explaining and re-explaining to strangers in headsets that the late payments had been tied to an ex-fiancé who was not even in the picture anymore. Some had been kind. Some had been bored. None of them had really cared. The bank only cared about my numbers. So I had done the work. Extra shifts. Side gigs doing makeup for weddings and events. Saying no to little pleasures so I could say yes to big repairs. I had met with a non-profit housing counselor, sat in a fluorescent-lit office while a woman with a neat twist-out and kind eyes walked me through my credit report line by line, showing me which debts to tackle first, which ones to negotiate, which ones I might never be able to fully erase but could at least shrink. I had cried in that office once, quietly, when we got to the loan with Malik's name buried under mine. The counselor had handed me a tissue and told me I was not the first woman she had seen in that chair with a similar story. She told me that shame fed debt like water feeds weeds. I held on to that. Shanice and I stayed in each other's lives in strange, small ways. She sent me a photo of her son on his first day of kindergarten, backpack too big, shoes too clean, grin wide enough to split his face. I sent her a text the day she moved into her own apartment, one nod in her mother's name, telling her I was proud of her. Malik paid child support. Sometimes. He bounced between jobs. The last I heard, he was working nights at a warehouse in another part of town, trying to piece himself back together. I did not hate him. The heat of my anger had cooled into something else. A wary distance. A lesson. I knew now that loving someone did not require me to let them wreck my future. My mother still lived in her same apartment. She refused to move in with me, saying she liked her neighbors and her routines. But she came over every Sunday, bringing foil-covered pans even though I told her she did not need to. The day I got the keys, she stood beside me on the sidewalk, her face shining. She said that even the ugliest house looks beautiful when it is yours. I squeezed the keys until they bit into my palm. I thought about that ring, the one I had left on the table. I did not know where it was now. Maybe he had sold it. Maybe he had stuffed it in a drawer somewhere, a reminder of a life he almost had. I thought about how I had once believed that ring was the clearest sign of my worth. Now, standing in front of this crooked little house, I knew better. My worth was not in what someone gave me. It was in what I refused to let them take. I stepped up onto the porch. The wood creaked under my weight, but it held. I slid the key into the lock. The door opened to a small living room with bare floors and pale walls, sunlight slanting in at an angle that made dust glitter in the air. It smelled like new paint and potential. I stood in the doorway, heart thudding. In my mind, betrayal had always been tied up with love, my father leaving my mother, Malik using my credit, the way the women before me had been trained to endure. What I had not understood before all of it was that betrayal could also be a mirror. It showed you exactly where you had been taught to abandon yourself. And if you were brave enough, it gave you a chance to choose differently next time. I walked through each room, touching doorframes, imagining furniture where there was none. A couch against that wall. A small table by that window. Maybe a plant I would try not to kill. In the back, there was a tiny bedroom with one window that looked out over a patch of yard. I could see the tops of my neighbors' heads as they talked over the fence. I opened the closet. It was not big. But it was mine. I imagined filling it slowly, not with someone else's secrets, but with my own things, scrubs for my shifts, a heavier coat bought on sale, shoes for the life I was making. Later that day, I sat cross-legged on the living room floor with a notebook in my lap, making a list of what needed fixing: leaky faucet, squeaky window, that patch of soft floor by the bathroom door. The list was long. So was my list of lessons. Nowhere on those pages did Malik's name appear as someone I needed to consult. It was not that his betrayal had turned me into stone. If anything, it had cracked me open enough to see all the ways I had been willing to overlook my own instincts in the name of being a ride or die. Now, I was just riding for me. Some nights, when the house was quiet and the neighborhood sounds drifted in, cars, laughter, the distant wail of sirens, I would think back to that grocery store parking lot. I could still see the light flickering above us, the way his hands had shaken just a little as he opened the ring box. I thought about how many lies must have been stacked behind that gesture even then. I did not rewrite that memory to make it less romantic. I let it live exactly as it had been, beautiful on the surface, rotten underneath. I needed to remember both parts, so I would not fall for the same combination again. Betrayal had not made me bitter. It had made me sharper. More careful with who I let sign their name next to mine. More protective of my credit, my time, my heart. One evening, Shanice stopped by with her son. They stood on my porch, him holding a small plant in a plastic pot, her smiling shyly. She said he had picked it out. He said that his mama told him Miss Amina had a new house now and houses needed plants. I took the plant, this spindly green thing leaning slightly to one side, and felt something warm spread in my chest. I invited them in. We sat on the floor, the three of us, the plant between us. We talked about daycare schedules and work and bills and the way men sometimes thought charm was a form of currency. She said she was applying to nursing school. I said I was thinking of doing the same. We laughed at the coincidence. Or maybe it was not a coincidence. Maybe women like us, who had spent so long stabilizing everybody else, eventually turned toward professions where that skill could work for us too. As the sun set, the house glowed soft and golden. I could almost see the outlines of a future where betrayal was something that had happened, not something waiting around the corner. The credit mess was not fully gone. I still had months of payments ahead, small repairs I could not yet afford. But when I lay in my narrow bed at night, the ceiling fan wobbling above me, I did not hear the buzz of a second phone under the bed. I heard my own breathing. Steady. Present. Mine. No twist. Just a black woman who had finally stopped paying the price for a man's secrets and started investing in her own truth instead.